Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Road to Disclosure. I'm your host David Sloan, and the last time we left off we were discussing the presidential election, the results, and how Trump won. I do kind of want to follow up with that and just acknowledge some of the revelations that I've experienced over the last couple of weeks regarding Trump. I did recognize the fact that Trump was not affiliated with the bloodline rule. That might have been premature in the sense that he may not actually be compromised in that sense, his family being affiliated with the bloodline rule, the Trumps anyway. And if you don't actually already know his real name, this actually stemmed from a report by John Oliver, who recognized Trump changed his family name. I don't think it was Trump. It was probably his father or grandfather. His real name was Drumpf, Drumpf, I believe it was spelled. So I don't know who decided it was better to be named Trump than Drumpf, but he did change his name. That's significant in regards to not trying to be associated with a specific lineage, in terms of who your ancestors are. Harder to prove, I guess, in that regard. But now, considering he's actually divorced and then he remarried to Melania, and I actually have not done a significant amount of research on Melania to acknowledge maybe her links to specific bloodline families. Some people have suggested she's just middle class. I don't necessarily believe that. But that they do have a son together, Melania and Trump. So they have Barron Trump, and apparently he lives in Trump Tower in New York City. He doesn't leave that tower for the most part, from what I understand. He will stay there, living on his own floor. This is significant. Trump certainly was, over the course of his time in real estate, he was obviously backed or given the ability to make a huge fortune, aside from his charisma when he's dealing with the public, with his show and whatnot. I think he outright acknowledges that his worth was over like $1 billion, around like $4 billion, I think, just from his name, his brand, so to speak. But from my understanding, in order to actually accumulate that much wealth, you have to make sacrifices. I actually believe, and this is kind of going into more of the esoteric knowledge, I think Trump sacrificed his daughter. She is acknowledged as, I don't have video on this, but there's certainly video on YouTube you can watch. Some of the mind control programs that existed out of the CIA, at least out of the CIA, back in the 1970s, if you're familiar with MK Ultra. Some of the programs, there's a number of names associated with these programs, these operations, MK Ultra, MK Often, pretty much acknowledging that they would develop different programs. The CIA said they discontinued the use of these programs after they were acknowledged by the media. That's complete fallacy, in my opinion. They certainly continued these things and developed them even more so. Some suggest there's a program called the Monarch program that utilizes a number of assets, humans, to go about their lives collecting information as, let's say, mind control pawns or just individuals going out and gathering information on others, and utilized in terms of, I guess, whatever mind control. They have a number of ways to manipulate people. They can use psychotropic drugs to affect your chemical process in your brain. They can also use psychotronic weapons that emit certain frequencies that are tailored to, I guess, whatever the programming is, the conditioning that you're exposed to. So there's a number of different ways that they do this. My understanding is that Ivanka Trump was affiliated with the Monarch program, which they tend to go after younger women. Um, I think the term they actually use. I don't have a video on this. It'd be very helpful if I did. But the term they use for at least the young females is like kittens. They're acting as kittens, and there's a number of them that actually emphasize this in the entertainment community. And so each asset, as it were, is usually controlled by a handler, and it's more difficult to understand who their handler is. But it's not just women. There's obviously men associated with this. If you actually do a YouTube search, more than likely you can find this out for yourself. It's pretty extensive from what I understand, and I'm sure different factions of the cabal utilize this. They're masters at mind control and brainwashing, and they're used in different capacities. I think not only in obviously a political sense, but just to accumulate certain knowledge and certain power, using it for like the information for blackmail and coercion. Definitely a major factor in the game of manipulation and whatnot that the different factions of the cabal utilize. So definitely urge you guys to kind of check that out. I wish I had some of the stuff set up I could propose, but maybe in the future I'll actually have that. So just to acknowledge, all of this is at least to accentuate my understanding that Trump might not be affiliated with Bloodline Rule, but perhaps Melania is, and their son, Barron Trump. It's come to my understanding that his birth date is significant. He was born actually on the spring equinox, and if you're accustomed to understanding the elites' penchant for kind of occult significance, occult rituals and ceremonies, they always like to surround a lot of their their agendas on astrological or astronomical significant dates. And obviously a spring equinox, or obviously you have the spring and fall equinox, you have the summer and winter solstice. So these are significant dates because they have a certain alignment, a certain energy associated with them. So somebody who might be born on a specific date, like the spring equinox, like Barron is, utilizes certain energies that they tailor to a specific agenda. Not only that, but again, he lives all by himself apparently on one of these floors in Trump Tower. And more recently, they actually have acknowledged that Melania and Barron do not want to live in the White House when Trump is sworn in as president. I don't know why that is. I actually haven't done enough research on that, but it's significant. The White House obviously has a certain significance to the rule of law. If Trump's going to live there and he's not going to have his wife or son with them, and Barron would actually be the first son to live there since JFK. JFK Jr. lived there when JFK was president. So if you kind of understand the dynamic in terms of the occult significance and a lot of these things, it gives you pause as to what's really going on. This is obviously kind of a lot of theory. It's not factually based. I don't know what's really going to transpire in the next couple months before Trump is sworn in as president on January 20th. But my sources are acknowledging a lot of different things could occur. So it's up for kind of speculation as to know what the situation is going to entail. But there's a number of scenarios that could. A lot of people are speculating that President Obama would disclose a number of things before he left office, particularly the extraterrestrial phenomenon. But I don't want to actually go down this road just yet because I'm kind of building a platform for some of this knowledge. Because it's hard for people to kind of come to this understanding without a background. And this channel is actually tailored to people that are not familiar with some of the information or knowledge that I've accumulated over the last 6 years, and others who are part of the truth-seeking community, it's important to kind of develop just like a timeline or information that doesn't. The rabbit hole is extremely complex, and it's a deep rabbit hole. To the extent that if I started explaining a lot of this outright, people would be like, "What the hell are you talking about?" So it's important to actually establish. My first 4 episodes were all based on understanding the existence of the cabal, and I really haven't actually gotten to the existence of kind of a competitor to the cabal or an opposition to the cabal. It's not obviously just non-bloodline rule. There's benevolent beings or benevolent groups that are associated with what we would call the alliance, and a lot of this kind of emphasizes the battle that's going on. There's a shadow war going on right now between the cabal and the alliance, and they're both comprised of a number of different factions and groups that are vying for different resources and control and whatnot. So I don't want to actually delve down into that until I've established some continuity in what would be relevant to people that are just kind of being brought into this. So just the fact that I've acknowledged, okay, the existence of the cabal is real, and I have credible individuals who have acknowledged this over the course of at least the last 100 years. I could certainly do a more in-depth version of this, but I do want people to kind of go out of the way and do their own due diligence. So at least I give an introduction into this, and hopefully people kind of discern their own truth and their own conclusions based off of some of the information I provided. But it's the issues that are going on now. Anything you see in mainstream media is all facade. It's all meant to kind of deceive you. They play with half-truths, and then through that they manipulate you and coerce you into believing that certain things matter. I mean, the whole dynamic of trying to establish a new world war against different groups, particularly, let's say, Russia right now, especially what's going on in Syria with the just kind of the geopolitical status of Syria and the Levant, the area surrounding there. Highly significant how the U.S. is kind of playing that out. One of the episodes I'm actually gonna probably utilize in the next 1 or 2 episodes is gonna provide resources that I utilize on a daily or weekly basis, so people can at least go out of their comfort zone. If they're familiar with mainstream media outlets, it's better to actually look at everything, so alternative media as well, to come to your own conclusions, and eventually establish the idea that mainstream outlets are nothing more than major propaganda meant to persuade you into believing a specific storyline, means to affect you in a negative sense, to kind of rile you up, make you kind of fear certain things. Alternative media tries to provide more truth. That doesn't mean that there isn't disinformation or mistakes made in reporting truths. There are, and that's what this discernment, your own discernment, is supposed to provide. But hopefully there's more truth in the alternative media than there would be in mainstream. So that'll be another episode I don't want to go into. Just to acknowledge the existence of this dynamic, this opposition to bloodline rule. You have non-bloodline rule. That doesn't mean both sides are good, bad, or indifferent. It's up to you to decide what you think is, the overall agenda. But more often than not, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Which is a quote. I can't remember the Englishman who actually acknowledged this, but emphasizing the idea that the power structure at large, they're not always out to benefit the I don't know if in terms of the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. If the common man is the proletariat, we're never the ones that benefit out of this relationship. The elites are always out to benefit themselves. So it's good to remain skeptical in terms of some of the machinations that are occurring on a global scale. Otherwise, you get tricked into believing that somebody's benefiting you because they're in a higher position, a position where they're able to persuade things to work for a specific class. The divisiveness that exists within political communities, within financial communities, within just the geopolitical establishment, they work off of kind of this relationship of keeping certain people, like race, culture, economic conditions, just a number of means to keep us divided. It's the only way they actually maintain their control, aside from maintaining their domination of the resources on the planet. They obviously have to kickstart movements. You look at the Black Lives Movement. Who funds these things? One of the notable adages in the truth-seeking community is follow the money. If you actually go and look at any movement that's in existence and you look at who's funding them, gives you a pretty solid answer as to what whose agenda it is. Whether it's the Black Lives Movement, whether it's the global warming movement. And that's going to be a whole other episode too. There's so much I could cover, and I don't want to actually go off on tangents. But there's issues that the elites, different groups, different factions, try to propagate just to profit from. And I'm not suggesting these things aren't real. They take advantage of people's well-meaning efforts to kind of clean up this world, and steer the narrative to their own advantage. So this is extremely important in terms of acknowledging, okay, the election just happened in the United States. What does that mean for the rest of the country? How do these elite groups, even if they might have a partnership amongst each other, how does it benefit them to steer the narrative in a specific way? You look at all the protests that are going on to determine whether or not Trump's going to be president. There's actually an effort to make it change the Constitution. They're acknowledging that maybe a constitutional convention is relevant to rewrite the Constitution, which obviously should not happen. But there's just too much at stake. If a certain group is going to rewrite the Constitution, they're going to rewrite it to their own advantage. So kind of staying true to the intention of our founding fathers, at least in this country, is a good place to kind of start, just to understand what's really going on. Because I don't think many people are aware. I mean, how many people even kind of have read the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence, aside from what they might have learned in history class? I don't think a lot of people go out of their way to really research it. So it's important to have, go and do your due diligence and really seek out some answers based off of almost re-educating yourself on what's really going on. And there's a lot of answers, whether it's online, whether it's through books, whether you go to a conference. Learning from different perspectives is key. So I hope you guys utilize this blog as well as many other sources, not just mine, to come to your own conclusions, because it's highly relevant to do that, to discern truth, and kind of see what speaks to you. If my perspective doesn't ring true to you, then it's fine. You don't believe it. It's important you come to your own conclusions. But I think the search for truth, search for knowledge, is paramount. I think that's something that everyone should strive for, because there's a lot we don't know. If you kind of maintain this contentment with reality, where maybe you work, you have a good job and you work to provide for your family, and you don't really have many other things to worry about except for kind of the daily minutia that goes on, that allows you to kind of remain in this reality bubble where you're not seeking truth outside of what impacts you on a daily basis. That really doesn't allow you to grow, in my opinion. Typically, I mean, from my own experience, I had to go through a traumatic experience just to kind of awaken to a lot of this knowledge, to seek out, question my own livelihood, question my own understanding of what reality is. Not everyone goes through that, at least right away. Maybe in kind of a like midlife crisis type situation would they reach it. But even then, people have different avenues that they move towards. Not everyone seeks answers to kind of the question of life and what it really means for them, but that again is paramount to this effort to awaken to specific truths. And if you don't have a passion for this, then there's a reason for that. Again, you might be in a certain contentment where you're okay with living under this reign of ignorance as long as you think that things don't affect you around you. The irony to that situation is everything affects everyone, especially the stuff that I believe in. I think on a kind of a macro scale, all the stuff that I subscribe to has an enormous impact on everyone's lives, whether they see it or not. And it's the elections are kind of like the least part of that, at least things of that nature. There's things that are well beyond the perspective of most people that think that a U.S. election is very, very important or relevant to their lives. It's, in my opinion, it's somewhat irrelevant in a large scheme of things. But that's something that hopefully you guys kind of recognize over the course of the episodes that I'm going to progress with. So hopefully in the next episode, I'm going to entertain a lot of the control structure surrounding the monetary system, give people some insight into how their lives are impacted, like what it would mean to have the financial system, the global financial system, kind of collapse or reset, like it's actually being explained in the alternative community. The truth-seeking community in particular recognizes that we're on the verge of a major shift on a large global economic scale. The competition between East and West, let's say, or just you could say the cabal versus the alliance, they're trying to compete for resources, and that certainly means money as a tool, used as a tool to compete for these resources. So I'm going to get into that in the next episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this one, and even though it's just me, I'm going to actually try and provide more episodes where it's actually just me talking, to give my opinion, because I think it's relevant in some circumstances, but let's say other episodes I'll certainly provide some of the factual evidence that I use and source myself. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks for watching.